Welcome to the Catbird Quilts. I'm Kathy Martin. I've been experimenting with flannel lately in quilting, design wall, possible throw pillows, and had varying degrees of success with it. And as you might imagine, I have a lot to say about it. So stay with me. Okay, so flannel. It's October now, so if you go to the thrift store, you're likely to find flannel shirts and flannel PJs and maybe even some flannel sheets, because all of us in the Northern Hemisphere are starting to think about having warm and snuggly quilts because, it's fall. So let's do this cozy, snuggly, soft thing. I have been watching a lot of videos about flannel because I have heretofore kind of avoided it like the plague. And I can't say why, but I had several things happen that have kind of propelled me into working with flannel. And I've been trying all kinds of different things that I wanted to share with you today. The first is I've been reading this book, Quilt Recipes by Jen Kingwell, which I want to make her name Kingswell. I don't know why. Jen Kingwell. It's an excellent book, by the way, if you're interested. Don't start reading it if you're trying to eat healthy or are hungry, because when it says quilt recipes, I thought it was a clever term. They're actually recipes, and they're for all kinds of sweets, and it will just blow your diet if you have one. But I was reading this book, and in the book, she has a technique for making faux chenille. So there was that. And of course, I was interested, and she talks about using quilting cottons, and I filed that away and moved on. And then I found this flannel sheet in our linen closet that we no longer use because I'm a middle-aged woman who is no longer cool in the evenings. And so flannel sheets sounds like taking a trip to Hades. So we won't do that anymore. And then simultaneously, we've been trying to figure out how to create a larger design wall in our living room, dining room combo. Additionally, I told you I have a lot to say about it. Because of the whole flannel thing, I was watching some videos on making a rag quilt, which I find them charming, but it turns out that there's more to it, and the trimming and the is kind of involved. So we'll get to that later. And then here's where everything comes together. I purchased a white flannel sheet from Amazon, and we will put that link in the description box with the intention of using it on the wall for design wall purposes. It is not a very high thread count, so I don't know what it compares to flannel that you would buy, for example, in the fabric store. It's 60 inches by 100 inches, and it is very affordable and white, so ticks all the boxes off for the design wall. But it was in fact so wide that I had to trim some off, so I had some leftover flannel, which I used in the scrappy hot pads that I made for my sister, and you can see that in the video if you're interested. But I had some kind of leftover white flannel scraps. So all of this converges, and I thought I would attempt the faux chenille strips and use a variety of my thrift store fabrics, including my white flannel from the cutoffs from the design wall. And so let me show you what that yielded. It wouldn't be me if I didn't experiment, I think. So what I did, I pulled a lot of fabric that I have. Some of these are shirts. I have some quilting cottons. I have a cotton that's kind of almost like canvas. It's ribbed, a quilting cotton, an Oxford cloth shirt. I have a twill shirt. There's a white men's shirt that's a very fine, soft herringbone, some linen, of course, some plain white muslin, and then some flannel. And I just stitched these down to a piece of quilting cotton that I had, overlocked so it wouldn't ravel when I put it in the washer, and cut each of them on the bias and tried it out. And in the book, she suggests getting a stiff brush and brushing across the strips of the quilting cotton. So that is this one right here. And as you can see, it does kind of curl up the edges and they're a little rough, but not anything substantial. And that's kind of the case. It starts getting a little more roughly on the edge as I get to the twill, which is a very light, soft twill shirt. And then the herringbone did pretty well. Linen about the same. The muslin, meh. But the flannel. Look at what that flannel did when I washed and dried it. It just curled up and puffed up and did this just fun, I don't know, faux chenille little thing. I was not expecting it to do that. I don't know why, because I had watched all the rag quilt videos, so you think I would have made that connection. I did not snip any of these, so I didn't go along and cut to make them rougher. I did use a brush, but the flannel, I just stitched it down and kept moving with my life and washed it. And when it came out, I was like, oh, look at that. And so immediately started having lots of ideas for ways to use this white flannel. And so I want to show you one of what I would consider the successes. And I think you might be surprised. So since it's October, I immediately went spiderweb. Now, I am not a huge Halloween-y decoration. In fact, we do no decorations for Halloween, save the pumpkins outside the front door. But for some reason, I guess just the way the flannel did, and because it was white flannel, this is just what came to mind. So this is nothing but just a piece of quilting cotton. This is the throw pillow. This is what I would consider one of the successes. And all I did was I obviously stitched the edge to protect it. And then I drew the lines of what I thought would look like a spider web and stitch the flannel pieces down. Now they are cut on the bias. So this is one long strip, this is one long strip, and these are each individual little pieces because I wanted to be able to control that curve. But the beauty of them being on the bias is you can get kind of whatever curve you want out of it. And so I stitched each down, put it in the washer, washed and dried it, and this is what it came out to be. My youngest, when I say she is beside herself about this because she loves Halloween and loves black and now thinks that this is going to be a decoration in her dorm. P.S. It's going to be a decoration in her dorm. So I'll finish it out. I may play with more strips along the edge to see if we can get some kind of fun, soft, roughly textural thing on the edge. Probably do it as an envelope backing. I did not quilt it. I think if I had to do it again, I would start off with a quilting cotton and then do a thin batting like flannel and go on and quilt the whole thing in advance and then go back and put my flannel strips on it. And I think it would just make it have that much more interest. I did have this vision, did not have time to realize said vision, but I can see pulling all of my low volumes that are white with predominantly black small print, black or gray, and doing just huge blocks of them together, then coming back and using maybe black flannel to do the spider web and actually have a whole throw with lots of interesting prints behind it. And since I have a whole slew of men's shirts that have small black, like I have pineapples and tattersall, and it would highlight the interest in each low volume while still creating this texture across the whole surface. So had that vision, probably not going to make it, but could be really cool. That brings me to my next flannel that I want to show you that I haven't experimented with yet, but I'm planning. You may have noticed the tangled quilt behind me is really coming together. And that is another area that I have used flannel in mostly because of the color. I had a viewer and patron send me some of her leftover flannel, and it's been months ago. And it just so happens that some of them were perfectly fall colored. So I used them in those blocks, just kind of intermixed in with the regular cotton and shirts and twill. So it will be very textural, but they seem to work pretty well. And that made me think, I don't know if you've seen those maple leaf blocks. There's a couple of them and lots of free tutorials on them. We'll link a couple of them in the description box. But I can totally see making a maple leaf and then using one of these darker or maybe even lighter flannels to do, I don't know what you call that, the ribs of the leaf for interest. So again, if you are not a big Halloween decor person, but you're like me and you really want to, well, I really want to redecorate our whole living room, dining room, but I have neither the time nor the budget. Also, Paul would put me out because once we have the living room arranged appropriately, rearranging and redecorating would mean things like moving the TV and such, and that's just not really an option in our kind of small space. So if I want to redecorate, I change out the throw pillows. Just so happens I have a fair amount of fabric to be able to do that. But I really can see how that could be so interesting to have a leaf-like pattern on a throw pillow and then the ribs be one of these darker, and maybe even the stem in something different. That is an experiment yet to be performed, but it's coming. And then next I want to show you one of my, it's probably not a failure, but it hasn't gone according to plan. And so I'd like to show you that. So if you've been to your thrift store lately, as I mentioned in the beginning, this might be what you're finding in the men's shirt section, or perhaps the men's or women's pajama section. I love plaids. I wouldn't say I love flannel, although I think by the time I get done with all my experiments, I might have softened a bit toward flannel. But it's long been my belief as I've been working with shirts that you can use plaid actually beautifully, even plaids that might not go together, pretty effectively. And very often the way to do it is to have either sashing or a quilt pattern that just separates them by a little something, whether it's background fabric or sashing. Even cornerstones can really make a big difference. And so to that end, I started thinking about how this just feels like Christmas to me and how much fun it would be. Fun. I did say fun. How much fun it would be to make a Christmas tree, something, wall hanging quilt out of all of these plaid flannels. And that could be really neat and cozy and holiday feeling and kind of accomplish all the things at one time. And so I started doing some designs and I thought, what if the Christmas tree was an advent calendar? And what if all of the little plaids, they were the pockets for the advent calendar? And so guess what I did? I started making an advent calendar. And my thought was that it would be great if the little advent pockets were big enough to actually hold something substantial. Because in my experience, advent calendars, the pockets or the little, envelope or hole or wherever are itty bitty and you really can't put anything in it. And I'm talking about a whole good sized piece of chocolate or a pack of needles, quilting needles, or a thimble or something fun and quilty. So I put this together, started making it. I was absolutely thrilled. Look, y'all, look at these pockets. Is that not super fun? And I'm thinking, this is great. And I got this far, and we'll talk about the lines that I've drawn on here in just a minute. And I realized I had I haven't put a border on it yet, but I had designed a border. This is not a small Well, it's not small anything, but it definitely is not a wall hanging. By the time it's done, I went back and looked at my dimensions. 43 by 46. That is a lap quilt. And when I put this together, I was not thinking of making an Advent lap quilt. It just doesn't, I don't know. I don't think that, maybe you have a ton of wall space. We really don't. I've punted on this project. This is the failure part. It really needs to be probably a third of this size, which is why the Advent calendars that hang on the door, why the envelopes or pockets or holes for the gift is this big, because it has to be able to fit on a wall hanging. But in the meantime, I'm learning about flannel, and let's talk about these quilting lines. They actually aren't quilting lines. My thought here is that I would take red flannel and connect all of the little Advent pockets with red flannel, and it would from a distance look like a red Christmas tree, and it would have that curly thing that flannel on the bias does. And I want to tell you why we're sitting here with just pencil marks, because, well, you're going to have to see for yourself. So here we are with the red strips. We're intended to become faux chenille, a la Quilt Recipes, Jen Kingwell. I got this much laid out and hated it. All of this was happening at kind of the same time. The realization this is too big. I obviously have several more rows to go. Well, 2 more rows to go to make it Christmas tree shaped. It was just too stark a contrast. And I felt like what would happen is the interest of all of the little plaids, the little flannel plaid pockets, just get lost behind this sea of diamond / harlequin shaped red flannel faux chenille, whatever you want to call it. So this is the one that I say was a failure. I kind of stand by the idea. I just think maybe I need to work on the execution. So I may come back and use more white flannel and put white flannel strips on it, and then just look like a flocked Christmas tree. I don't know. It may go in the bin. It's I'm not right now. I'm almost like my feelings are too strong about it. I just had to kind of walk away the other day. Like, can't talk about that anymore. But the theory of the little flannel pockets actually worked beautifully. I still am just thrilled. Do you see? I keep putting my little fingers in the pockets because I think it's so cute. And surprisingly easy to do. I cut 2 squares the exact same size, and then I turned a 1/2 inch under on one of them, pressed it, and then turned that 1/2 inch back another 1/2 inch and stitched that down to make it a closed edge. So if you want to take this design and run with it and make something great out of it, go with God's blessing. It will be so much fun. This is just too big for an Advent calendar. Before I move on, I want to show you, and you can absolutely, and I encourage you to get the book. But if you're wondering how to do flannel on the bias, let me show you that real quick. So basically all you have to do is fold your flannel. Well, I mean, you can do it with quilting cottons too, and maybe you'll have better luck than me if you decide to do quilting cottons. But you fold it on a 45-degree angle with your fabric. And so the fold would be here. And then you just draw a line. I used white chalk pencil, about a 1/2 inch, just all the way through the whole thing. And then you just stitch right down the middle of that, which will put you at having a 1/4 inch loose fabric on either side once you then cut on the line. And you can see that here. So this is one of those 1/2 inch, stitched right down the middle, cut on my chalk line, and then that is where we are. And that is the very thing that made that little fuzzy spider web. Maybe we'll make a yellow fuzzy maple leaf. And lastly, might make some really fun Christmas stockings. I went to the thrift store the other day with my eldest daughter and made a turn through the linen section and found this really fun, happy polka dot pillowcase, and there was actually a fitted sheet and a flat sheet, and they're 100% cotton. I think what I might do next is, well, obviously I'll take this pillowcase apart. Number one, already been washed. And then probably make a quilt sandwich and quilt it, and then come back and put my little happy red strips that were way too contrasty for my advent calendar and do some sort of fun, hopefully fun design, maybe even the same diamond shape. And see, look, because it's polka dots, I can just line it up on the dot. Dot to dot, my favorite order is joy. And so I think if I did that, or maybe when, I don't know. Lots going on in the Martin house, might not happen, but I think this could be really, really cool to just quilt this whole piece and then come back and add the flannel faux chenille strips. And then would that not make the cutest stocking? I think it would. And if I really wanted to go for it, or if you really want to go for it, after cutting out the stocking part, I could do the same thing with the white flannel for the fluffy top. Wouldn't that be fun? I just think it has so much promise. And then all the way back, let's throw it back to the beginning, to the rug quilts that seem like an awful lot of work. I can totally see where you could make a baby quilt with your quilting cottons and then embellish them with these strips. And then you would get all of the nubby, textural, soft, just all of the goodness of the flannel faux chenille without having all of the work and the thickness to manage as you make the rag quilt, and no cutting, no snipping all along the edge. I mean, you make the quilt sandwich, stitches down, done. Put it in the washer and dryer and you're ready to roll. So I don't know. I just feel like there are so many applications to this. And in the meantime, I cut up that whole white flannel sheet that was intended to be the design wall. I've since ordered another one. It's probably going right back. And my blue flannel sheets that I can no longer use for flannel sheets on our bed will probably become backing and background for yet another Christmas project that's coming. I hope my little experiments in flannel have been thought-provoking and maybe inspiring to you. Hopefully you can take these ideas and run with them in your own, or try other fabrics for yourself and see. If you choose to get the very large white flannel sheet that we're putting in the description box, just know it's probably not the same thread count as the flannel that you would get in a sheet or the flannel that you will buy in your fabric store. So you may want to do some experiments of your own. Thanks for being with me today. I'm Kathy Martin. This is the Catbird Quilts. Thank you so much for watching.